Hello, everybody, and welcome back to Know Thy Enemy, presented by the Right Way Sports Network. We are here, as always, to get you prepared for the upcoming Bengals game. This week, the Baltimore Ravens are coming to town, and the Cincinnati Bengals will look to start off a win streak to try and recover the little bit of ground that they've lost in their season by dropping a couple early games. This is a rivalry matchup that many are very familiar with, although it may surprise some people to know that this Baltimore team is a little different than the ones that we've known in the past. It's not the typical team where the defense is absolutely just stalwart and locked down, and the offense is doing enough to be creating explosive plays and make rely on a good run game to make their way to victory. This is a really unique team where the Baltimore offense has kind of really found their rhythm after struggling at times a little bit outside of Lamar hero ball in week 1 versus the Chiefs. After 4 weeks of play, Baltimore is actually up to 4th in terms of EPA per play. And as much as Lamar Jackson's gotten heat for not being a good passer, he's ranked 6th out of all quarterbacks in EPA per drop back. Their offense is 3rd in success rate. They're 1st in EPA per rush. They're 1st in the NFL in yards per play on early downs. And also on top of that, O-line was suspected to be a big time weakness of this team especially after the poor performance versus the Chiefs in week 1. Obviously, it turns out that, hey, going up against Chris Jones can kind of make things look bad for you. And that has kind of leveled out in recent weeks, partly because they've relied so much on their run game, their play action game, their screen game. And that's kind of improved the numbers for them a little bit, getting pass blocking snaps that are not necessarily true 5 and 7 step drop back pass blocking snaps. But still, to their credit, all that in mind, they rank 3rd in pass pro composite rankings, which takes ESPN, SIS, and PFF grades and combines them to get a 1 unit measure to try and weed out bias or other holes that may be prevalent in certain statistics for other services. So that's the Baltimore offense. Obviously, a lot of really good numbers there. But looking at the Baltimore defense, yes, they are an excellent run defense. That cannot be overstated. They are 1st in rush success rate allowed, 8th in EPA allowed per rush. However, that secondary has not really lived up as to their billing as a coverage unit, with Kyle Hamilton bursting onto the scene last year and playing like an elite safety. You have Marlon Humphrey, who has been one of the better corners in the NFL over the last 5-6 years that he's been in the league now, I believe. He's been a very talented corner. And even Marcus Williams as a safety has been around the NFL for a while and has played at very high levels at times. But looking at the overall numbers, the Baltimore defense is 20th overall in EPA per play, despite being 1st in rushing success rate allowed, which should tell you the struggles they've had a little bit there in the passing game in terms of coverage. They're also 19th in terms of EPA allowed per drop back. So the 19th best passing defense there in terms of EPA per drop back leaves a little bit of a window maybe for one of the best passing offenses in the NFL over the last few weeks to squeeze their way through, find a way to get some points, and attack that. We'll talk more about that in our keys to victory later. Let's look a little bit more at the Bengals offense as a whole, right? Or I'm sorry, the Baltimore offense as a whole right now. Had to switch modes there for a second. Derrick Henry and Lamar Jackson are the engines of this offense. And I don't think that really surprises anybody. Just go ahead and pay the necessary lip service to these very talented players. Derrick Henry, Roll Tide, is PFF's highest graded running back right now and 2nd in terms of yards per attempt among running backs. And I think the most surprising stat about him from this season right now is he is 1st in breakaway percentage, which is the percentage of runs of yours that go for 15 or more yards. So he is still finding ways, despite not being the breakaway speed guy, to take great advantage of his blocking, let his block set up, great timing, great pace, and knowing when to hit those afterburners. Obviously, he hit almost 22 miles an hour on his run against the Bills the other night for 78 yards or 80 yards, something like that. So he's still doing it, defying all odds. Good for you, Derrick Henry. Lamar Jackson, still doing his thing, man. He is still evolving. I was always of the opinion that Baltimore should never have kind of jerked him around a little bit trying to get that contract situation. I think Lamar's a very talented player. And he is continuing to evolve his game, not struggling as much against man blitzes, developing more as a passer. Still can have some ball security issues a little bit in terms of just running with the ball, but he has done a pretty good job of protecting the ball as a passer with only 2 turnover-worthy plays in his first 4 weeks, both coming when pressured against blitz. He does have 5 pass touchdowns and only 1 interception, and he's 7th in terms of yards per attempt. He's also very elusive, as we know, where he's 6th in pressure to sack percentage, which means a lot of his pressures do not turn into sacks as he eludes those defenders and ends up scrambling or throwing away or completing the pass. And it's also important to note that he is, again, like I said, 6th in EPA per dropback, 5th in PFF passing grade, averaging that 7.5 yards per attempt as a rusher as well. So Lamar is as threatening as he has ever been. So where on the offense is there maybe some holes that can be exploited that the defense can kind of, where should they shift their focus, let's say? Well, the good news for Bengals fans, I know after many years of being tormented by talented tight ends, the least of which is not Mark Andrews, they may not have to worry about that as much as they have in the past, where Mark Andrews has kind of gone missing a little bit in terms of the pass catching element to that he provided to the offense. He's 35th out of 54 tight ends in PFF receiving grade right now. He's 36th in yards per route run, and he's 44th in drop percentage right now. So not the numbers that we would expect from Mark Andrews, who's been a very talented pass catching and receiving tight end when he's been healthy in the NFL throughout his career. He is still, however, one of the most elite run blockers at the tight end position, ranking 4th among all tight ends in run blocking and 1st in run blocking grade on zone concepts. Now, however, you may not have to worry about Mark Andrews, but that doesn't mean you're out of the woods on the tight end receiving game just yet, as Isaiah Likely has picked up a little bit of that slack. He also has been a very talented run blocker, 1st in PFF run blocking and 2nd in zone blocking grade. He's actually been 2nd among those 54 tight ends in PFF receiving grade this season, and he's 3rd in yards per route run. So they may not ask him to run routes often, but when he does, he is a very deadly potential threat, especially on the play action game. And he is also 9th in passer rating when targeted. Now, one part of the reason that the running backs and the tight ends have to fill in for so much of the short game and the receiving game is because the wide receiver core has struggled to be very efficient or productive thus far. And that's partly because of the receivers, but also partly because the offense is just not designed to run through the wide receivers as much as it is the run game, the play action game, the screen game, and the quick game. Zay Flowers is 62nd out of 91 receivers this season in yards per route run, 68th in PFF receiving grade, 38th in passer rating when targeted, and 28th in yak per reception, which is better than the rest of his numbers. But last year, he was one of the best yards after the catch weapons. So to see him take a step back a little bit in his sophomore year, not unexpected for any type of receiver or any NFL player for that matter, but he definitely has not been the explosive weapon that they needed or that they had last year. Rashad Bateman ranks very similarly to Zay Flowers, 69th in receiving grade, 63rd in yards per route run, 52nd in passer rating when targeted. They have done a little bit better in terms of utilizing him, not so much on just clear out routes and kind of letting him work over the middle on the in breakers, the outbreakers, and kind of doing what comes better to him. But still, they have just not found a lot of production from their wide receivers, nor have they had to their credit with the success of their run game that they have had. Obviously, we know the Ravens offensive line is always going to be playing pretty well. They're 3rd in team pass blocking grade and run blocking grade for PFF. Tyler Linderbaum, still one of the best run blocking centers in the NFL. Ronnie Stanley, still one of the best pass protectors when he's healthy, and he is 6th among tackles in pass block efficiency. Andrew Voorhees, the guard who was back at practice, will be playing, is 3rd in pass block efficiency among guards. And now the weak spot of the offensive line where you might be able to take advantage is right tackle Patrick McCarry, who is 41st out of 52 offensive tackles in pass block efficiency. So Miles Murphy coming back, maybe only playing 20 to 25 snaps. Joseph Osai, those guys who are going to be playing that spot need to be able to win their pass rush reps to try and help out Trey Hendrickson, who's going to be up against a very talented tackle in Ronnie Stanley. Now, looking at the defense, we said their run defense was still very, very good, elite even. But there is opportunity to take advantage of the secondary and also the linebackers in coverage. Starting off with the superstar linebacker in Roquan Smith, he is still very good this season, but he is vulnerable and he is not the just overwhelming face melting presence that he was on the defense last year when he was playing out of his mind. Even though he has 12 defensive stops this season, which is nothing to sneeze at, that ranks 23rd out of 55 linebackers. And he's allowed 14 of 19 targets to be completed for 13.2 yards per reception and a 49.6 coverage grade. Now, to his credit, 3 out of the 5 incompletions have been a pick and then 2 pass breakups, but that is not the level of play that we've seen from Roquan Smith, and I'll be interested to see if they try and take advantage of that, attacking the middle of the field with T. Higgins on some dig routes, attacking with the tight ends out of 12 personnel and on play action, maybe trying to use Mike Gesicki or Eric All in that regard. I'll definitely want to see what they do with that, but Roquan just again, very good player still, but was not playing the just lights out, unbelievable way that he was last year. The secondary, like I said, has talented players, but based on what they've put on the field this season, they can be exploited. Veteran safety Marcus Williams talked about him struggling in coverage. He ranks 63rd out of 67 safeties in passer rating when targeted, and also 58th in coverage grade and 64th in overall grade. So he's really not been good in coverage against the run, really in any facet there. Now, looking at the other safety is obviously Kyle Hamilton, a very versatile chess piece, can line up in the box, in the slot, a deep safety, post safety, whatever you need him to do. However, he just hasn't quite had the same impact as he did last season, which is to be expected. We know elite secondary play is really hard to maintain year in and year out, especially over small samples. He is second on the team with 21 tackles and has generated 4 pressures as a safety, as a pass rusher, but he has missed 6 tackles and ranks 52nd among 64 safeties in missed tackle rate and is also 48th in passer rating when targeted on the season. So has taken a bit of a step back in coverage, has had some issues with missed tackles early in the season, like many other safeties and corners have. Bengals fans know all about that. But it's just goes to show that Kyle Hamilton's not a bad player, but there are opportunities to take advantage of the secondary where in years past it may not have felt that way. I think it's also important to remember that Marlon Humphrey and Brandon Stevens have done admirably this season, ranking above average in coverage, run defense, and tackling. You are also relying on a very slender, very light corner in Nate Wiggins, who was their first round pick out of Clemson this year, who has done well and had his ups and downs. But I think there is an opportunity where Jamar Chase has had his way with Marlon Humphrey at times. T. Higgins and Andre Oshivas, all of these guys are big receivers that have speed as well to threaten vertically. And I think that's going to be an advantage the Bengals can use because obviously we know what Jamar can do with Marlon Humphrey and has done in the past. T. Higgins is an extremely talented receiver, and I think Brandon Stevens could have his handful there. And if Nate Wiggins has got to be out on the field, well, he has to cover one of these guys. And no matter who is being covered by Nate Wiggins, who is probably 6 foot, a $175 soaking wet, maybe $180, you're going to have a lot of opportunity size-wise to match up with that, whether that's Mike Gesicki, T. Higgins, Andre Yoshivas. All these guys are going to have that advantage. And also Nate Wiggins has really struggled with tackling as well. And it's just not much of the tackling corner that Marlon Humphrey and Brandon Stevens are. So there's an opportunity there to try and force him into open space one-on-one with somebody and make him miss that way. D-line, as always, has the potential to wreak havoc. Odafe Owe has arrived and become the pass rusher that many thought he could be. He's 7th among edge defenders in overall and pass rush grade this season. Already has 4 sacks and 4 QB hits. He's looking really, really good. The pass protection, especially with Amarius Mims, is going to need to be on their P's and Q's. Amarius Mims especially needs to watch for that inside move that Jadeveon Clowney got beat him on a couple times. I'm sure the Ravens will have that on tape and will be looking to do a little bit of that. Kyle Van Noy. Holy shit, dude. Turn back the clock at 34, why don't you? This guy has had 2 sacks in each of the last 3 weeks, 7 total defensive stops, and he has an 88.0 PFF grade on just 113 snaps this season. Now, I don't expect him to have 2 sacks every week, right? We remember when Adrian Claiborne had his big 5-sack game with, I believe it was the Patriots and the Falcons game from 2-3 years ago, maybe. Yeah, that did not persist. So we'll see how much that persists going into the Bengals game, but it is something that they definitely need to be wary of, and we can go ahead and appreciate Kyle Van Noy for what he's done at his advanced age. A lot of Bengals fans know from the potential free agency list too that Justin now Namdi Matabuke is a potential threat on the interior at any moment. A excellent penetrator, one of the better interior penetrators in the NFL, especially last season. And much like Kyle Hamilton and much like Roquan, these guys who were their superstars, super studs on defense last year have just not been at that same level, though they are still very good. Um, he has got 10 pressures on the season with 1 sack and 4 hits and 5 defensive stops. So even though he's taken a little bit of a step back from the elite guy that he was before, he's still a very, very good player who can disrupt the interior of that line. So that Michael Pierce, obviously, death taxes. Michael Pierce being an excellent nose tackle. We can pretty much count on that year in, year out. It's looking like the secondary is going to be the opportunity for the Bengals to try and attack this Ravens defense. So, with that in mind, let's look at our keys to victory on offense. Like I said, test the secondary. You've got a safety who has been one of the worst coverage safeties in the NFL with Marcus Williams. You've got Roquan Smith allowing 14 of 19 passes targeted his way to be completed for 13.2 yards per reception on average. Challenge Trenton Simpson, the second-year linebacker in coverage. Challenge Nate Wiggins to tackle in the open field to cover some of these bigger receivers. Test Marlon Humphrey, make him cover Jamar Chase and make his day long. Use T. Higgins to attack the middle of the field to pull everybody in and free up the boundary, and especially some of these deeper shots. I don't think that the run game, though very successful and very effective for the Bengals in the last couple of weeks, is going to be the way that they end up beating this team. I think the Ravens' run defense is just way too good, and I think it primes itself for the Bengals to use their passing strength and really lean into it this week. I think they do still need to utilize 12 personnel and motion and play action to try and create open looks and make sure that the Ravens are still honoring the threat of the run. And I think they still will run the ball a little bit. I just want to see them maybe more so than getting 50, 70, 100 yards. I just want to see them have a high success rate in terms of, hey, we threw the ball on 2nd and 8 and we got down to the 3rd and 1. And now here we come to run and get 2 yards, but we get the first down. Throw it deep. Don't put yourself behind the sticks on 1st, 2nd, 3rd down with bad runs. Don't, throw the ball on 1st and 10 and then be like, well, we'll just take what we can get on the run and see where we're at. And then next thing you know, you get a 2-yard loss and now it's 3rd and 12. Okay. Try and stay ahead of the sticks. Utilize the run game when it makes sense. Defense. This is where the tricky part's going to be, right? You're obviously playing against one of the best run offenses against one of the worst run defenses. I think getting McKinley Jackson, Miles Murphy, BJ Hill, maybe Sheldon Rankins we'll see back will help. Obviously, instead of playing Lawrence Guy, Jay Tufele, and Zach Carter, you're going to be having actual 3 NFL starters and not 3 practice squad or off the street guys playing on the field, and that's going to be advantageous. But I think you're going to have to do some of the bear front stuff. I think you're going to have to do some of the 3 defensive tackle, 2 defensive end things. I think you're going to have to send a lot of blitzes at them. I think you're going to have to do the spies, which means you're going to have to sell out to stop the Ravens offense, which fortunately for you is very similar to the run game in sense of the passing game is a lot of quick game. The passing game is a lot of screen action. The passing game is a lot of play action to where if you're generating pressure and playing underneath on all of that and challenging them to beat you deep with the receivers who have not been productive, I think that's going to be your best chance to victory. Is going to be clamping down on this run game, limiting everything you can, attacking the screens that they're going to use because they're going to be very creative with trying to get to the screens with Justice Hill, with Zay Flowers. Clamp down on all the underneath stuff, make Lamar try and beat you under pressure, throwing it deep. I think that's their best way to try and limit this offense and at least get just a couple stops to get their offense some breathing room. I think you need to stack the box, lock up the tight ends and the running backs because those have been their most consistent down-to-down passing threats. I think that's pretty much going to be your key to victory, where if your offense is passing well on this secondary that's weak, if your defense is sending blitz, trying to create fumbles, penalties for the Ravens who have not been as disciplined as they usually are in terms of fumbles and penalties that they've been dealing with, You've got offensive linemen who have played well in their own right, but on the truer pass sets and dropbacks, they might be a little bit more questionable. Just try and send everything you can at them to make them play the game that they don't want to play on offense. And I think that's the way you get a fumble, an interception, a stop, somehow to just get your offense enough breathing room to where they can play with the lead. And I think that's where you want to be as the Bengals. Thank you all for joining us. I appreciate you staying with me. It was a long one this time. We had a lot of fun information to get to. It's always a great time when we play the Ravens. So thank you for tuning in. Please, as always, give this video a like, subscribe to the channel. Houday, and we'll see you next week.